My name is Travis Fields, former Windows engineer at Puppet Labs. Now I'm a senior DevOps engineer doing Puppet and all platforms, including Windows, RHEL, everything. I was on the Windows modules team for about a year and a half. Before that, working on Windows and Puppet 3.0 and 3.3, which was very painful during an upgrade process from server 2003 to 2012, which in and of itself was a painful process. Let's talk about what we're going to cover today. Basic stuff, ship it, of course. Environment variables, what you have to do for that, just basic stuff. Preferred IDEs and just basic tools and testing. What we're not going to cover is Git, RSpec Puppet, Puppet fundamentals, and Travis CI. There's enough docs out there on that, and I expect you guys probably will want to use those. Alas, no, and everybody says, it failed on Travis, and I have to say, not me.
You got a lot about it. We would believe you.
Yeah, you know, I wish I could take that credit, but no. So Ruby. Oh, Ruby, I love you. So there's the bundled Ruby that you can actually get with Puppet. A lot of people like to use that. Some of our developers internally like to use it. There's the Ruby installer that you can download and install, either downloading it or using something like Chocolatey. There are requirements with Ruby installer that you have to actually have a dev kit to get some of the gems to compile. And of course, as with anything on Windows, you have to make sure it's in the path environment variable. So what are some of the reasons why you would actually want to do the bundled Ruby? Freebies. Who doesn't like freebies? I do. Gems you'll have to have that have been tested and vetted by Puppet Labs. They're already installed, ready on your gem path. And also with the latest versions of Puppet, they've also fixed the SSL issue with installing gems. For those who don't know, there is an issue. You have to add a cert to your SSL certificate path in Ruby if you install it from Ruby installer for older versions like 2.0 and 1.9.3. And we'll cover a little bit of that. And again, why the Ruby installer? How many of here only develop for one version of Puppet? I see one hand. So multiple versions of Puppet running all over the place. Or you want it on the Forge and working everywhere with multiple people. I go with the Ruby installer because, for one, I want to install on multiple versions. I'll use pick, those who are not familiar with that. And it doesn't require that I actually install Puppet on my system. I can actually worry about the gem dependencies there on an isolated basis. And a simplified path. If I want to install in C Ruby, I can just say, hey, it's there, I know where it's at, and shortcut everything. And again, with pick, similar to those who know what RVM is, or RBenv, similar type idea, being able to switch quickly between versions. So let's jump over to a wonderful background there. Those who don't love that one. Where are you at now? Yep. So I have a basic application here. I'm actually going to be using thank you, PowerShell, for messing up that command. So I'm using Chocolatey to install my Ruby. I've actually put together a gist how to do this, but you pretty much have to download Ruby, download the dev kit, and there's a wiki actually, or a whole Git communication log around the Ruby SSL issue. So rubyinstaller.org, a little backstory and information I've been getting on this. The group that was maintaining this has decided they're going to stop maintaining it, or they have other things they want to work on other than this. So hopefully some people in this audience will want to work on that and keep that rolling. The world is switching between command lines and PowerShell. Thank you. So just to make this a little easier to actually read, what we've effectively done is we have Chocolate on this machine. We're installing the Ruby 2 5.9.8 version specifically. We're going to use Chocolate as a provider, download both of these. There is a little extra stuff that's not on this particular environment or further down. But you'll see here we're actually downloading an add trust external CA root. This is actually talking about the Ruby gem issue that we have with a Ruby installer version versus what Puppet has already actually resolved. And if we go through here, we are actually just puppetizing exactly that. We have Windows environment, setting our environment variables, going through everything and just pretty much, I'm going to be dumping this into a module, by the way, just to install Ruby and get everything up and running for you. And you do have to actually modify a config file, and again, simple file line with Puppet. We've actually added the file that we need, the line we need, and we're good to go. And then we execute it. The reason why I haven't published, it's not idempotent yet.
Are you going to give us like a link to these modules in your Puppet code?
Yep. Yep. Or you can just see me afterwards. I actually have the gist link.
Okay. Could you repeat the question?
He was asking actually for a link for this gist where this actually, all this code actually sits.
As well as your cool icons and like pictures.
All the slides actually, so all the icons and stuff like that, the slides will be actually uploaded later on. They've actually asked all the speakers to give them their slide deck. So again, here's a little clearer picture of what was going on there. So IDEs, this is a hot topic for me. Anybody have a preference of Geppetto in the audience? Visual Studio users? A few hands back there. Adam? 4, 5? What about IntelliJ or RubyMine users? Okay, so a hodgepodge of stuff. Notepad++. I kind of figured that was actually where that was going. Sublime. There's another one. Yeah. They go on and on. Text editors, IDEs. It's a convoluted word between the two of them. So I actually went on Wikipedia. And I was like, what is an IDE? What makes an IDE? And so this actual definition came up. And it's an integrated development environment, IDE, is a software application that provides comprehensive facilities to computer programs for software development. Does Notepad++ achieve that for you? Some highlighting. OK, great, it highlights. Vim can highlight. Vim does a lot of things too. Yeah, an IDE is not a text editor. So what makes it great? Highlighting, of course. What about auto-completion? We have some of that. Formatting of your code. Can Notepad++ do that? And pass Puppet lint. OK, no. Parsing. Does it actually parse your code to make sure everything's correct? And does it have VCS integration? These are tools that I find are critical for my workflow. And if I have them built into my IDE, I function a lot better. So Atom is kind of like the Docker of Notepad IDEs right now. Everybody's talking about it. Everybody says they love it. What are the pros? It's free. It's got a plugin API that you can write to. And everybody writes to it. And some of them are really bad plugins that crash. Syntax highlighting, right in there, built in. Great. What's not good about it? There's no test integration. Can you run your tests from the actual IDE? Atom, specifically. Limited auto-completion. It doesn't understand scope beyond the current text file. And it's not aware of language deprecations. Like, if you're writing for Puppet 3, it doesn't understand what Puppet 4 code is going to be deprecated. It's not going to work anymore. Or that you're writing something that will only work on Puppet 4, but not work on Puppet 3 unless you have future parser enabled. There's none of that context. And limited auto-formatting. My personal favorite, and no, I don't work for JetBrains. I was a Java developer when I was a Windows sysadmin, so I don't know how those two go together, but hey. Pros. Has anybody here used IntelliJ or RubyMine? Okay, it's language aware. So what I mean by that is it understands, like I was talking about, the context of this is going to be deprecated in Puppet 4. This is just bad syntax in general. It'll help you to refactor your code. Complex diffs and local history. I have so many times made changes to my Puppet code. I try to test it, and all of a sudden, it just breaks. I'm like, oh, God, it was working 5 minutes ago. What did I do? I didn't commit it to Git. OK, well, bad on me. But I'm iterating right now. It actually saves local copies in the history so that I can actually go back and look at the history of that particular file and what changes I've actually made. Syntax highlighting, that's common amongst most of them. Autocomplete on dependency modules. This is huge. So if you have something in your metadata JSON or your fixtures YAML file, those are dependencies. IntelliJ will actually look at that module if it's loaded in your spec modules fixtures repository, and it will give you the autocomplete of parameters and classes and defined types. Now, I don't know about anybody else, but that's actually an IDE. I don't have to think about, what was that parameter named again? Is it TMPdir or is it TEMPdir? What is the actual name of that parameter? I just say go. And I'm like, OK, yeah, autocomplete. Yep, that's what it is. Unfortunately, it is written in Java. So what does that mean for everybody? Well, you have to have Java installed, for one. It's startup time. It takes a lot of time. It has to load all of the plugins, all of the connections, and it has a huge memory footprint. If you run any IDE that's written in Java, you will have these issues. The other big thing is it actually costs money. I just upped my license, and it's about $100 depending on if you're buying brand new or upgrading. Each year you want to actually upgrade. And they're changing this into a subscription model as well, so be wary of that, and you might want to do it soon before they change to that. And so let's take a look at actually what these IDEs I'm talking about specifically. So I'm going to go back to my lovely Windows Java module here. And I'm a good person who actually runs his tests and always validates his files before he commits them, right? So I'm going to run lint. And OK, I've got a lot of stuff going on there. And for some reason, it wants to test my Windows environment tests folder. But that's a different issue all entirely. So let's go take a look at my download file here. Well, anybody who's written a decent amount of Puppet code can tell me immediately I've got some issues here with my formatting. I have improperly aligned hash rockets and all over the place. So let's see what Atom will do for me on this. So we'll just go and say auto indent. Okay, great. So anybody see that? Oh, yes, it indented. But it will not format my code. And I am a lazy programmer who does not like to go and fix every line where I've got misaligned hash rockets, because my new parameter that I'm utilizing and my 30 parameters that I'm using is a little longer than everywhere else. So now I have like 30 lint failures. So yay, I fixed one issue there with that alignment, but I want to shortcut it. We'll jump over to IntelliJ here. Short command, Command-Shift-L, done. See, my hash rockets are aligned. I'm happy person again. If I run lint and don't worry about the spec fixtures there, you'll see that few errors I have there, malalignment on download file, are indeed gone. Easy as cake, right? But let's talk about a little further here. What about this pget module I'm using as a dependency, or any of the dependency modules? I can actually go here and say, you know what? I'm saving it. Now it's not going to work for a little while. I go back and I'm like, what was that again? I can do a control space, and all of a sudden, I have meta parameters here, plus any parameter that pget actually takes. Now, how many actually like and will love this feature now that they know about it? Really? You guys just stay on the docks all day when you're developing modules? And so I know mine that I wanted was header hash. And yes, trailing commas. I'm not a fan, but hey, the community has decided. And we're all happy again. I fixed my code. Now, I was talking about the complicated diffs in history. I gotta remember where this is on. Let me X out of. This presentation mode's giving me an issue. So local history, so I can actually look at Git history, but also I just want to look at local history, and you'll see here, I can actually just go back in all the changes that I've made to this file. So you mess something up, you can easily just roll back and say, hey, what did I do again? And you can actually merge directly over any of these changes. Like, so you really want this right in your IDE, you can just say, click, move it over to what I have currently, that's where I messed up. Any questions on that part so far? Hate? Love? So running tests. I expect all of you to be writing spec tests at least. How many, show of hands, who actually writes spec tests? Oh man, it breaks my heart. Spec test will save your bacon more than you will ever know. Unfortunately, if you are developing on a Windows platform, you will have some modules that just won't work when you try to run spec tests. And it's not a gem issue. It's people not remembering to stub out the file framework that you're actually on. So they assume you're always running in a Nix system. So they say, oh yeah, root file system is /. You know, it's not $, it's nothing whatsoever. So you will run into failures. Yeah. You will do this several times when you're writing tests. You're like, what was I thinking? TDD is great in theory. Does anybody actually do it? I try to, but majority of the time I hack out code and I write my tests afterwards. It's a just brutal truth. Yeah, it's like, let me just get this to work on the server first. They're hard to debug. Again, tests won't run from, unfortunately, I hate to say it, even a lot of the Puppet Labs modules. If you try to run the tests on a Windows box, they will fail unless you're in Cguin, because, of course, Cguin is a Unixy path. It might work in Git Bash. I've not tried it in Git Bash, actually. But I know standard command prompt or PowerShell, it will fail. Even the Puppet command window, if you start that up, it will fail as well because it's a standard command prompt. So his question was, will it work in Git Bash, for those who didn't hear? So let's talk about a couple tests. Everybody wants bigger text, right? Of course, you can tell this isn't actually my development environment. Plugin for Ruby is not installed. So I said we weren't going to cover RSpec Puppet, but we'll cover a little bit here. Anybody who's not familiar with RSpec Puppet? You're not familiar with it at all? Okay. Who is actually familiar with it? Rob, you can put your hand back up. I can see you now. Sweeney, I know you know it. Let's restart the IDE here. YAML. How I hate thee. Sorry, say that again? So his question was, do they have an RMate thing for IntelliJ? I don't know. I'm guessing you're talking about a particular language, or? No, it's remote. Oh, remote access? Okay. Yeah. You can launch it from the server and it sends it back to admin or something. Okay, so remote admin, remote console type deal. There's a lot of things in IntelliJ that I do not utilize, including being able to connect to servers remotely via SSH, managing them, managing databases. All of that can actually be done in the multitude of windows they have. I mean, they are primarily a Java IDE, and even the Ruby one, RubyMine, has a lot of those features actually in it. But it's a matter of either a third-party plugin or a lot of times also just there's baked-in stuff that you can enable or disable. based on your needs. And for this purpose, I pretty much disabled everything because I want a fast startup time and I do not want to be bogged down by like trying to parse XYZ, connecting to the cloud or Heroku, any of those features whatsoever. So this is a pretty basic RSpec test. Some of the things, of course, you're going to want to stub out because you want to be able to confine your test that it's mocking out Windows, and when it's not a Windows system and you're expecting it to be a Windows module only, that you're stubbing out Windows operating system if that's the fact that you're actually going on. The architecture as well. This is pertinent to this particular module specifically because I determine if you are even capable of installing a 64-bit version of the JDK because, of course, if you're on an 86 version, it's not going to work. This actually, so this particular feature right here that I'm talking about, this stubs out factor. So this is a way to either talk to your types and providers, define types or classes. If you're actually expecting those facts in your manifest, this will stub out that factor value call with what you actually are specifying here. So you can do your negative and acceptance tests right out of this, like spec tests, not acceptance tests. Also, you can specify, like I said here, the title. So you see that pretty good up there with the red. Unfortunately, Pry and Ruby do not give you the best of colors when on a Windows console. Another thing, Ruby does not accelerate on Windows. Go figure. So Pry is your friend when writing tests. Anybody who uses Pry currently or know what Pry is? Okay, a couple people, most of them are Puppet Labs employees. So Pry is a great tool. Like, I've broken a test, I can't figure out what's going on, where am I at in my test, what does the catalog actually look like that I'm compiling? Pry is a debugger for your Ruby code. Now, you're writing RSpec tests and testing the compiler. I can now actually look at, in this it block, what my catalog actually was compiled as. And it does have tab completion as well. So I don't know if you can actually see here, we have settings, Windows Java params, different classes that we've actually loaded in this particular test. I have my class here. With the ensure, I know what that is, the default value of true, target of ctemp. And the list goes on and on. But I can also do an ls. So this will allow you to go into a whole different kind of level of crazy stuff to talk about. So you can actually go into a particular catalog. I'm not going to dig too deep in this because, again, this can get very long. But some of the important things to actually look at here, I can't even read the blue on my screen here. Kind of like your resource keys. So here's some of the stuff we actually have going on this machine. We have a download file, an install file. This is all the classes that we're actually specifying here, or defined types. We have a main stage, a setting, an exec here. So this is actually getting all the way down into dependency packages that are not directly this module, but things that are being called as a result of this catalog compiling all of this information together. So I can even, as you see, I'm actually changing directories into a catalog object. And I can see everything in here. Because my screen resolution is so high, I keep doing this.
Can I ask a question about that?
Sure.
The source for the Java that you, installed, I think it was like the temp folder. Where is that on your Puppet Master that you got it from, or where?
Oh, that's actually, so kind of change gears here. It's actually just part of the module. So, not that file. So there's this Windows fact that I've actually created that says Windows Java temp. And that's actually what's dictating what that value is as a default. Source is also being dictated based on a complex set of configs here, like what version of JDK are you utilizing. No, these are all unfortunately hard-coded. It's actually built into the params. So what he's asking is where am I getting like some of this information of building up this source? So if you look here, we have a giant hash of what major and minor version of Java I have, the build number associated with it from Oracle, the root download URL, the cookie string, because I have to circumvent the cookies, and the JDK base install name. So some of the basic stuff that we actually are building out. And based on what version you pick, we build out that URL with the build number and what, JDK 6-U4. No. Well, ultimately, this module will download from the Oracle site. Yes. Yeah. You can specify to download from somewhere else, because I don't want it to download from Oracle every time and flood my pipe. But yeah, it will definitely do that. And as weird as pry is, you can even CD around throughout objects as if it was a directory. So that's pretty much most of what I wanted to talk about today, and kind of thought my rant on IDEs would go longer, but you guys apparently agree with me on most of this stuff. So questions? About 10 minutes for questions.
Oh, I was just curious, your choice in Ruby, is that just because like the native 3 client versus like using PowerShell or something?
For developing for modules?
Yep.
Well, you have to have Ruby in order to run the RSpec Puppet, test the catalog compilation. It's the language of Puppet. That's the only reason. I'm not an avid fan of Ruby. I know enough about Ruby to also dislike Ruby. But I'm a monoglot programmer. I work with so many different languages at this point. Actually, I believe.
Yeah, please. I wanted to ask questions about this thing. Okay, just a general question concerning Windows and Puppet's interests with Windows. I know everything just works so much better with Unix, Linux operating systems, but are you guys more concentrating on building out your Windows functionalities and?
Okay, so for one, I don't work for Puppet. I used to work for Puppet. But yes, they are constantly pushing further and further with Windows development. I was actually responsible for, with a couple other people, the Microsoft SQL Server module that we launched last year and just relaunched the next version like a month ago. But also like putting more effort into things like Chocolatey, DSC, really making sure people are aware that it does work great on Windows. Unfortunately, there is a just misinformation and people not realizing how well it does work, especially since I started with 3.3. It's night and day. And yeah, unfortunately, Windows is a very API-driven system versus Nix systems are a lot of like text files, editing, restarting this, restarting that, like different services to modify those. It's not that easy on Windows. It's all APIs. So there's reasons for it, but a lot better now.
I've had to do a lot of hacking to make it work with Windows, but I think the trend is upwards.
Yeah, and if you, I don't know if Bruce Payette has actually spoken yet, but he's actually going to be talking about the DSC module with Ethan Brown and the efforts they put together. Who doesn't know of Bruce Payette and a Windows developer? Pretty much everybody, right? Yeah, so I mean, Puppet Labs put a lot of effort together with Microsoft on the DSC module. The team worked numerous amount of hours. DSC stands for Desired State Configuration, and it's part of 20. DSC, yes.
Do you run any tests through IntelliJ, or do you prefer using PowerShell?
So I myself do not develop on Windows machines. Every place I work, they give me Macs. I used to work in a Windows shop, and when I did, yes, I ran it through, usually on PowerShell, and my machine goes to sleep again. And so I would run it through PowerShell because the output actually was, I hate to say prettier, but it was. It would respect colors more than the regular command line without like some Unix hacks to get those colors in there. But there is some caveats to that. You will get caught sometimes with running PowerShell on that. Say again? ConEmu. Okay. But yeah, I will run tests sometimes through IntelliJ just to have a side-by-side so I can put a console up on one side and do my pry right there and then edit the file right there next to it and step through. But usually I'm running it right from a command line because if I'm going to run pry, it ends up working a little better through regular command prompts. Okay. And one more question back there?
Yeah, just wondering if you had experience running Puppet configuration on Windows desktop, specifically things like group and user policies. We have a lot of customers that want to manage all these things, not just reg keys, but other Windows-centric components using Puppet, but it's not really known as the Windows configuration tool. So, want to see what your experience is with that.
So I know there are some modules on the Forge for local group policy, but not managing the overarching group policies. And actually, Rob Reynolds is one of the Windows developers at Puppet still, and he actually would love to talk to you about that one. Throwing you under the bus, Rob. And there are ways around it, but group policy is not something really to maintain typically with Puppet. Local group policy, I could understand, yes, more. they're kind of like two sides of the same coin, though, in some regards.
This is real simple, but talking about the startup time and the memory footprint, what do you find you need in order to run IntelliJ comfortably?
It really doesn't take a lot. It's like a few hundred meg, depending on the size of the project and how many files it actually is parsing. One of the things I find that is most beneficial is usually if you install the gems in that local file system on that particular module's path, make sure you exclude that directory or exclude any files that are going to grow extremely large. Like if you happen to run a log file for RSpec tests and whatnot that's going to just keep growing, make sure it's excluded, because by doing that, it will not index those files. And as a longtime IntelliJ user, I will tell you that will eat up process faster than anything. And you will fight that one tooth and nail until you figure out, oh yeah, that log directory that is creating giant XML files every time I run my acceptance suite is the problem. So yeah, that's a big one that I've found over the years. Also, you can hide it from your view when you exclude it. You can just, I'll show you the quick shortcut here. Again, presentation mode doesn't give you all the beautiful options, but so if you see here, I have the .ide idea folder here. There is a gear here. You can actually just say, show exclude files, or just hide them. I don't want to see them. I don't want, like maybe the examples directory, for instance, you don't want to see. You don't want to think about it. Any log directories, your .bundle directory, any of that stuff, you can hide out of your view. And again, you won't have your IDE actually churning through meaningless garbage. Another one I would tell you to do as well is spec.fixtures. That is where your dependencies will actually get put into place with RSpec Puppet, and the Puppet Labs spec helper will actually download those modules and put them in the right place there. I would also make sure you ignore that depending on the amount of dependencies you have, and if standard lib is one of them, there's a few hundred files there, and I would just say make sure you ignore that.
We have time for one more question over here.
Sorry, I'm pretty new to Puppet and how it works with Windows, but is Ruby required for like getting Puppet to work on Windows, or is the Puppet DSC, is that enough on its own?
So Puppet is written, the agent is written on Windows. The Puppet agent is written in Ruby. Sorry, too much caffeine today. It's all on Ruby on the agent side. So yes, it's required, but you don't have to do it other than the bundled Ruby that comes with Puppet. You can just use that one as well. And if you have questions about that, I can talk to you offline about that as well. All right, thank you very much, and get out there and puppetize.
Thank you so much, Travis.